Welcome to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I am your host, Chad Hufford, and this is the podcast where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the working world. Each week, we dive into the incredible stories of honest, hardworking folks who have found financial success through grit, determination, and good old-fashioned elbow grease. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn how to turn your hard work into your own success story, you're in the right place. This is the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again in another episode of the Blue Collar Millionaire Show, where we help everyday folks accomplish extraordinary things with discipline, patience, perseverance. Today, we're with Dan Magone, the founder of Magone Marine. We're going to talk a little bit about resilience. We're also going to talk about his book, Port of Refuge, about his experiences in the wild west of Alaska, doing underwater boat repair and boat salvage. And, people have seen this stuff, the shows, the crab shows and things like that about the Alaskan experience. I think some of that stuff gets maybe propped up a little bit, but you were in the thick of it. And I want to talk about that a little bit on what that really looked like and how dangerous that job really was. Because I was reading some of that, and it was hard to believe that, that was just a normal day in a life for you. Underwater welding and anyway. Mm-hmm. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about your motivation for writing the book. We talked about this a few years ago. I know this was a long process. As we both know, mm-hmm. Writing a book it's a very difficult, it's often an intimidating process. But what was your motivation for that?
Well, I had been encouraged to write a book, by my friends and family. I've had a colorful life with a lot of drama and that sort of thing. And so I think that was the thing that people were expecting, and so, but when I got around to the point of writing a book, it was like, okay, well, this can't be just about me. There's got to be some point to it. There's got to be something that that people can walk away with, And so it needs to be like, okay, if you're gonna go to all this trouble to write a book, then what is it that they're going to be looking for, And I know when I read a book, I want to walk away being built up, Mm-hmm. I want to be, like sent off with a fresh attitude to go out
a new perspective on something.
Right. Yeah. Whatever it might be, some way or another it needs to build us up. Right. And so the book doesn't really center around me so much. I use the stories in this book to, and the drama that's available there to make up maybe for some of my lack of being a real writer, so to speak. The stories are compelling in themselves, right? And so they're interesting and that draws people in. But there's more important stories about human nature, what it takes to succeed, what it takes to get through life in a way that, where you're a blessing to other people and you're building each other up and, building each other's character. Building your own character, recognizing that that's an important process, and it is a process that we all go through. And so, so there's themes running through the book that are more important than any one particular person,
So and I can attest to that. The book, you could have made a movie or even a series off of some of the stories and adventures, and they weren't just close calls. Your book mm-hmm. talked about people that lost their lives mm-hmm. in the middle of the oceans outside of Alaska and in the middle of incredible storms that for you guys was just another day on the job. But if those storms were hitting on the coast of Florida or something like that, it would have been national news. But for you guys, you were used to working in those conditions. So a lot of drama, a lot of adventure. But as you were writing and even as you published the book, like what is your hope that people do walk away from? Like, what would be a takeaway that you would hope somebody could bring with them into the rest of their life after having read and experienced some of the adventures and hardships that you talk about in the book?
Well, it's like there's nothing that we can't get through and be stronger for in the end,
Hmm.
right? It's if we're uh, you know, first of all, we need to show up, right? We need to do our part, you know, and that means be ready to go, and and so when you're called on to, step into a role, whatever it might be in life, you got to be ready to go for it, and then it's going to be challenging, right? And so, but uh, we're made our character is built, is strengthened by adversity. And
There's no growth that happens inside of a comfort zone.
right, exactly right. I mean, I don't care whether if you're working out, exercise, whatever you do, you've got to push yourself. It's not going to be easy. If it's easy, then you're not growing. You're not getting
Yeah.
anything done.
Yeah. Whether you're working a muscle or working your character.
Right. Or your mind. It's all yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what really stuck out to me in this book was the idea, well, of resilience and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
Like I sometimes don't know where one ends and the other begins.
Sure.
You said, continue to show up. I think something you just wrote, whether times are good, bad, busy, or slow, showing up with a level of excellence. And by the nature of your job, and I want to get into that in just a
Mm-hmm.
moment, by the nature of what you did every day, when you got called upon, it was already a bad situation.
Right. Yeah. We would, as far as this vessel response thing goes, typically the vessel was already abandoned, by the time we got aboard.
So you're talking boats capsized, shipwreck,
Yeah,
run
it could
aground.
be on fire. It could be in some stage of sinking. It could be in some stage of breaking up. It could be whatever it is. And so it's our job to get in there and intervene and mitigate the situation, or prevent the situation from getting into a worse case.
So just like a firefighter or search and rescue, you guys were running into the situations that
Right.
everybody else was running out of.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Coast Guard in our place, typically the Coast Guard would be there first with their search and rescue, their helicopters or whatever. They'd get the crew out of harm's way, and then we would step in and see what we could do. Yeah.
And even for our folks in Alaska, I don't think everybody quite understands just the nature of what this looks like. I really, I mean, I've known you for more than a decade, I think. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what you did.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what you said you did, but I didn't know like the day to day what that looked like. And one of the things you talked about in the book, and you have to correct me, but the distance between Dutch Harbor and some of the waters around there and the closest dry dock is like what, a couple thousand miles or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
at one point,
at one point,
eventually we got our own dry dock out there.
but for when you
but
started this, a lot
I
of
started, the nearest dry dock was in Seattle,
okay.
or thousands of miles away.
So not only is this a bad situation, but you had to salvage and repair these boats where they laid, so to speak. I mean, there wasn't this tugging it into some nice harbor and they pull the boat out. And
frequently, that's what it entailed. Was, first of all, you got to stabilize the situation. If you can't
in the middle of it,
you get in there, you stabilize it. Now, can we tow it, or is it going to sink? If it's going to sink, then we got to do some more work with it here. Then if we can get it into some protected water, now we can do a little more to it. All right, now is it stable enough? Is it safe to try and tow it to Dutch Harbor? If we can get it to Dutch Harbor, then we can do more thorough repairs, and frequently it would be sent to Seattle from there, depending on, I mean, sometimes it was minor enough they could go back fishing again. But we had one of the barges that does half of the ore offloading for the Kivalina mine, big 300-foot barge that had this huge offloading conveyor on it. And so half of their production depended on this barge. So that barge came into Dutch Harbor. That it was salvaged by a fellow, Mick Lights, out of Portland some years back when he was still operating, and he managed to get the thing afloat. He was a real expert at that, and that's his career is quite a story. But at any rate, he got the thing refloated, but the bottom was basically torn out of this barge, and he took it from the beach at Cavallina and refloated it there, got it to hid behind St. Lawrence Island until he could head to the Pribilofs, and then he hid behind the Pribilofs for a gale. Then he made it, and then he was trying to make it to Dutch Harbor, right? And I really needed a job, so I'm praying he gets there right. When he pulled alongside the barge, my barge, the Yahweh Jireh, there was bottom plate touching the bottom of the bay in 40 feet of water. In other words, the bottom was so ripped apart that steel plates pieces of the barge were hanging down 40 feet underneath the barge, right? That's how destroyed it was. To start repairs, we sank skiffs with ballast on them, drug them underneath, and refloated these skiffs inside the barge through the holes in the bottom, right? And that's what we worked with to start setting up scaffolding inside, because we had to repair that barge so that it was safe enough to tow from Dutch Harbor to Seattle in the wintertime in December. And they made it there on Christmas Eve, right? And so, yeah. So anything from a little patch up to get them back fishing again to something on a scale that most people would not imagine.
And just to clarify that, I mean, you're out there, the ocean open, out in the Aleutians, and you're having to do work just to be able to start the process of towing this boat back to Dutch Harbor, because sometimes they were in such a state of disrepair that you couldn't even start with that process. At what point in your career did they actually have a dry dock in Dutch Harbor where they could pull the ship out of the water and actually work on it in the harbor?
I'm trying to remember what year that was, maybe 2009 or somewhere's in there, when we brought in an old Foss. It was actually a World War II era dry dock and floating dry dock. We bought that from Foss and brought it up there, and that was 1,000-ton capacity, and so it could handle a good number of the vessels, but the biggest fishing vessels it wouldn't handle. Like the biggest longliners and the big factory trawlers wasn't big enough for that.
And for the first 30 some years of your career, you didn't have
no dry dock at all.
So,
right? Yeah, everything had to be done underwater. Yeah.
So everything had to be repaired underwater to at least get it in a position where you could transport it down to Seattle and get it pulled out. And the story you just told about the sinking the skiffs and bringing everything up, I mean, was that, I remember one of the stories in the book where you guys were inside. So you come up underwater, you were working inside the ship, and I can't remember if it started taking water in one area or another, but the ship started to turn. And I believe one of your guys actually drown in the process, because
no, I don't.
Am I confusing a couple of stories?
A couple of stories.
Okay.
Well, we had one diver get trapped under a ship that shifted up at on St. Matthew Island, and we got him out in time. Another huge wave came in. It was a 15,000-ton ship, right?
And started pushing the ship over as you guys were working on it.
Raised it up enough to where we could pull him out where he was pinned, and so. Yeah, but I mean, I rode a crabber. It was over 100 foot long that we had it under tow. We pulled it off the beach off Long Island out in front of Kodiak. I was the only one on board, and it rolled over, and so I just walked around to the bottom and grabbed onto the propeller and hung onto the propeller until my son came over the small boat after a bit there and picked me up off the boat, But then we towed it upside down all the way around.
Oh my goodness! For how long?
Backside of the island. Well, took us most of a day to get around the backside of Kodiak Island, and we took stock of things, and we were still good. So we towed it upside down, and what's that name of that little port Port Bailey? We towed it into Port Bailey and rolled it right side up again, and then hauled it out of the water there.
Yeah, there's a book written by a retired Navy SEAL called No Easy Day. Like that, I mean, that could have been the subject of this book. And, in fact, as we're sitting here talking about it, you think of some of the cold water training and stuff they do on Kodiak.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I
LS
met those
SEALs.
fellows. Yeah.
I mean, you should just take them out to work with you. Just like you just work with us for a week, you'll get your
Yeah.
training.
Long Island is where they train.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, man. So I mean, as we're sitting here talking about this, and I think I even texted you this when I finished the book, just all the close calls, the adventures, the adversity. I mean, there was many times where you were in danger of losing your life, where it looked pretty grim, and I just kept thinking like it's obvious God still has work for Dan to do because there's no reason other than God's grace and mercy.
Right. Well,
You're still here with us today.
yeah, and there's just a smattering of that in here. I didn't want to put all this stuff in here about me because then it kind of distorted the purpose of the book, right? And so, yeah, so there's been, many instances, where things looked pretty rough, and for me personally. And so, yes, I agree, that, grace has everything to do with all of this, so, that instance with the plane that went down out in the Pacific, was an example of, it's like the odds of getting out of a situation like that are just so infinitesimally small, that you have to say, well, there's got to be more to it here than just, our uh, uh, our physical and mental abilities. There's something else going on.
Yeah, so it's not just your capacity that was able to get you out of that situation.
Right. No, it had very little to do with us. Every time we went to pat each other on the back for succeedingly to get to the next step, it was like became aware that no, there was 20 more steps we're going to have to get through, and it's like we're running out of ideas, type of thing. But at any rate, yeah, the I suppose if you go back and look at the definition of a miracle, right? In order for something to be a miracle, it can't be just difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be really physically impossible as far as our understanding of things go. The odds have to be just way out there,
Yeah, and I'm glad that our God is not one of statistics. Doesn't
Sure.
care about the odds.
I read a scientist the other day. He said that these scientists had come up with a notion that the odds that you and I can be sitting here speaking to each other today on this planet, right, is like 70 trillion to 1.
Oh, it's crazy. When you think
Right.
about all the reactions and the sperm and the egg and all these things have to happen.
Right. Yeah.
But just
Anyway, yeah, that's the scientific, of probability of us being here.
there's a verse in Psalm 139. I think it's verse 12 or 13 somewhere in there. A lot of folks are familiar with, you knit me together in my mother's womb, and you saw me and knew me, but there's a couple of verses after that we don't often talk about as much, and the language is around all my days were formed and numbered by you before there was one of them.
Mhm.
And I think about that in light of your story. Yes, I believe that you and I both created by God, designed for a purpose, but the language in those other verses are our days were also formed and numbered and planned for us to step into them. And I definitely saw that in this book where, I mean, God is preparing you throughout your life to do what most people would not be willing to do. And I think that it goes back to what we talked about of perseverance and resilience. And
Yeah, but see, where it comes with me, where that started is I didn't have anything, right? I mean, there was, I came from a pretty rocky family background and stuff. And so all I really had to leverage was myself, and so I told myself when I was a young person that, I wasn't going to let fear stop me. And because it slowed down everybody around me quite a bit. And so it's like, well, all I got to do is figure out how to not hurt myself. But if I can step forward when nobody else is, then that's going to give me an opportunity. And so I kind of, build a career from my teenage years all the way up. I built a career with that mental attitude.
And your career started with underwater welding, correct?
Well, it depends on where you
Oh,
want to start your career. But, my career, I decided to be a deep sea diver. And I
okay.
had this romantic notion of what that was going to be about. And, of course, it was very naive. And, that my first big crisis in life was to go to the Gulf of Mexico and then find out that that wasn't really what I was intended to do. And so I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, but I turned around and left Louisiana and drove back to the West Coast. And that was kind of the first big crisis for me. It was a good thing. It wasn't, but at that time it was hard for me personally to just change my plan, but that was that was like the first big change in my life.
Well, there's something you wrote recently, and I want to read this. When doors close, I did not continue banging on the wall. But you also recognized that you had to jump into opportunities. So you had a lot of pivots in your life and your career. And in addition to perseverance and resilience, there's also, I think, that concept of discernment, where you have to know when to push and when to change directions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think circling back to financial planning and things like that. Obviously, your story is so much more contextual than that. But just narrowing it just to finances, like goals change, plans change. You have to know when to pivot, when to make adjustments.
Right.
And I think that's so important. Like you don't put together a business plan once and then just drive forward indefinitely. You don't put together a financial plan once and that's it. I mean, this is something that requires constant attention, constant perseverance, but also the humility to realize I've got to make a change here.
Right.
I've got to pivot.
Absolutely. Right. And not get upset about it. Some people really, I know the first couple of 3 times for me, it was really hard. It wasn't until later when I could just say, okay, Lord, let's see what you got in mind. We're going to change direction here. But then, you have more confidence then, see, because, you've been through it before, he'll see you through it again, so every time you make it through one of those changes, then you're more confident the next time that it is going to work out, and so.
And not to put you on the spot here, but I guess I'm going to. Is that part of the issue with why people don't try things today, that don't go out on a limb, is because they haven't built up the confidence doing hard things? And I guess what I'm asking, Dan, is, for people whose life is their lives are too comfortable, does that keep them stuck?
Well,
The boat term might be run aground or something.
exactly right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. The if you've never tried to overcome something, then you don't know whether you can or not, right? If you've never pushed yourself to your limit, you don't know what you're capable of. And if you're afraid to do that, I mean, if you're afraid to get up and do your push-ups in the morning because it's going to be hurt, then you're not going to get stronger, right? So if you're afraid to go out and push yourself in other ways, it's the same thing.
So for you, I mean, starting in welding in basically sludge in Louisiana, going to California, coming up, or going to the West Coast, going to Alaska. I mean, it wasn't so much that you got to the point where you stopped feeling fear. It was just you had built up the confidence and courage to step forward even in the face of fear and adversity. Is that fair?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And the thing of it is, you have to build it up. You can't just all of a sudden say, oh, I just have to not be afraid or something. Yeah, of course there's the fear of the unknown, and anything can always happen, right? But just like in emergency response, then the more difficult situations you're in, the easier it is to remain calm and objective, and to lead, in order to lead in a situation that's a little bit chaotic or dangerous, then you have to be really calm, because you're the one that's going to set the tone, right? Everybody's looking to you. Are we going to be okay here? So you're the one that's giving everybody the confidence, whether you're charging into it or deciding that, well, it's time to pull back, then they're looking to you for their confidence to do that. And so you can't get that just by reading a book,
Yeah, or speaking nice things about yourself or listening to motivational tapes.
Yeah,
Like
right.
you've got to
have
do
to go out
hard
and
things.
experience it. It's the same thing for the folks that go out there and deal with, the medevac guys, right? You're not going to go out there, just right out of passing your EMT class and deal with some beautiful young person that's all busted up somewhere and not get all emotionally goofed up about it, unless you've got somebody there to basically hold your hand and get you through this thing, because otherwise they'll eat you up emotionally, right? And so the more that you go into those situations, then pretty soon you can be objective. You're not going to get emotionally attached. You're going to go in there and you're going to do your job, and you get your job done. And you can fall apart later if you need to, but you're going to get your job done, right? And so, any difficult job is going to be that way. The more potential there is for stress, then the more you have to work yourself up to being able to handle it,
Well, in not just job, but in life in general. And
Right.
you can try to avoid the storms as much as you can, but the storms of life will come.
Sure.
Now, that's metaphorically speaking. You literally stepped into the storms to repair boats and all that. But I think if we spend our time trying to avoid the storms, we end up atrophying our character and our backbone to be able to withstand the storms when they do hit.
Sure. And our marriages are no different. A marriage follows the same principle.
So I just read this from you here recently. You said we tend to get married with a very shallow understanding of what love really looks like. And it is usually not too long before the tide goes out and we feel ourselves hard aground. And again, I think that's how boat folks say stuck or in a bad spot.
Right.
If we truly are committed, we stick it out. Love deepens, and the low tides in life has less effect. Marital strength and financial strength and security go hand in hand. I love how you wrote that, because this speaks to, again, resilience, perseverance, but the idea of commitment. Committing, not, you said, if we're truly committed, we stick it out. Love deepens and the low tides in life have less effect. Doesn't mean they necessarily even diminish.
Right.
The low tides in life.
There'll be more issues come up.
Yep.
Right. But the fact that your wife has seen an example of your commitment. Okay. So now, she has got the confidence to go into the next struggle, knowing that, it's just a matter of getting through this problem. It's not like it will still be okay with us, right? This is just a problem that we need to solve, right?
And we'll
it's not an existential problem,
I think it kind of goes back to that idea of building confidence in the storms you already weathered, and as new storms hit, you realize, okay, the details are different, but we can get through this again.
Right.
We've done it before. We can do it again.
Right.
How long have you and Sue been married?
43 years last
43
month.
years last month. Yeah. So, and I know that, again, this character that you developed of resilience and perseverance, it's had a ripple effect into every area of life, in your finances, in your marriage, in your career. And I love what you said about that, because I think, commitment really is the decision to continue to act long after the emotions and the quote unquote honeymoon period is over. Like you don't always feel like doing the right thing, but you've decided in advance you're going to continue to do the right thing.
Right.
And I think that so often we miss that part of commitment, and we think of, well, I'm committed as long as it's convenient, as long as it feels good, as long as it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And what you wrote there and what this book is about is commitment regardless of circumstances.
Sure. And the other thing that applies directly to business as well, because when your clients and your other business associates, when they see that your commitment, that you really care, that you understand that this is a two-way street, that that you're there for them, then they'll be there for you. When the chips are down and you're having a bad time, it's like, it's nice to have, your people you do business with know that you're good for it. That they can let that bill slide for a month or two because they know that you've always been good for it, and they know the kind of person you are. And so for them to know that, I mean, they need to have seen that over time, right? They don't get that just from you telling them. Your reputation is your most valuable asset, and so when they see that commitment, then uh, then yeah, so then that it it will do well by you on those times, on those years that are hard.
Well, it's building up relationship capital. That's something we talk about a lot, but not just with the other person, but even with yourself. Because you said this, I'm going to paraphrase. You said it in not so many words, but as you go through hard times, as you face challenges, you face adversity, and persevere through that. Not sometimes without scrapes and bumps, and I mean sometimes there's still scars, but you learn to even trust yourself. You can look back and say, I am the type of person
Mm-hmm.
who can continue in hard things, who can do what nobody else is doing, because
Right.
I'm not going to give up.
Right.
And I think that's so important. I mean, just in this last year, if we just narrowly look at finances, so again, this book is about so much more than fixing boats and
Mm-hmm.
storms in Western Alaska. I mean, you can apply it to health, marriages, business, finance. But just if we just narrow down on finance, just this past year, we had major market decline. A lot of people's accounts went down 20% in just a few weeks. And in those periods, not everybody weathered that. Some jumped ship, um, but those storms come. They come quite frequently. I mean, we've been through a lot together, whether it's COVID or, I mean, there's been a lot of those. And sometimes the storms are not marketplace storms. Sometimes they're within somebody's life, going through, the loss of a child, or somebody gets sick, or going through a divorce. Like, but again, it's building up that internal resilience so people know that I can weather through this. And one of the things that we try to do, Dan, as you know, is be there, surrounding the folks we work with, to support them when those storms hit, because you may have chosen a career that went into the storms, and were called out into them. But as we already mentioned, you cannot avoid the storms of life. You can run away, you can try to hide, but they will find you eventually. And that's where resilience and perseverance are, I just believe, essential, non-negotiable. And I appreciate the picture that you've been, of both of those character qualities, and showing true commitment. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Anything else that really on your heart that you want to mention?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that I would just say that we need to have something that motivates us, that is bigger than ourselves, right? And if you're just trying to do what you're trying to do for your own sake, then that's probably not going to get you very far. Okay. So I would just say, take a look at what's your motivation here? What is it that you're all this is going to lead to? What's your legacy going to be, right? Okay. And when you look at that, then that will give you the strength to see your way through some pretty tough stuff. So.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's so important. Again, just narrowly looking at finance. If we look at the idea of planning for retirement as just an opportunity to quit working,
Mm-hmm.
that's not big enough to make the sacrifices. And we've already talked about this. Like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dan, you're never going to be able to retire because you can't
Well,
you can't not work.
That term doesn't fit some of us very well.
It doesn't.
Right? Yeah.
It doesn't. And that's what I love about you. I mean, it's raising the stakes on what that even means. And you and I both believe more in a concept of financial independence where you don't have to go to work anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But you still choose. You just got back from Dutch Harbor recently.
Yeah, I still spend half my time out there. And so there's, I'll help with the fleet if there's nobody else that can handle it. I don't compete with anybody. I'll just give them a hand if they need it, right? And then I have a big project of my own I'm trying to get wrapped up out there. And then, my biggest priority is my family. And so my writing now, I would love to write another book, but, it's, for me, if I write a book, it's going to end up mostly going to like-minded people in a relatively small scale. And so my motivation now is to try to do my little bit for unity, right? Let's try and bring people together so we can talk things through. Right now, we're headed to some really serious trouble in our nation because of this division that we've created, and there's a lot of things that both sides are concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we've got to come to a place to where we can sit down and talk to each other, and listen, and so anyway, that's where. So I'm writing letters to my family. Those are the most important letters. But then, otherwise, I'm trying to do my little part. And it doesn't matter whether I'm successful or not. Just like the stories in the book, win or lose, that's not what's important. If I feel like this is what I'm called to do, then I got to do it. Otherwise, I'm not. I'm gonna be uncomfortable.
And whether times are good or bad, busy or slow, you're gonna show up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, and your why is so much bigger. Again, I mean, you could have retired a while ago, but you're making an impact. You have decades of experience that you are allowing others to glean from, and I just appreciate that you, because it's the sacrifice and hard work that you put into your career, into saving, all these different things. Simply just doing all that just to quit working one day, that's not a big enough why. And I think for a lot of people listening, beyond all the other lessons we've talked about, I think that's another important one is like, what are you going to do with financial independence? What are you going to do if you don't have to work anymore? Because you're right. I think the objective has to be big enough to compel you through those difficult times. So Dan, thank you so much. I did want to mention the book is available, portofrefuge.com. That's
Mm-hmm.
your website. It's also on Amazon, other major book retailers.
Mm-hmm.
And we might have to have you back on, talk about the unity concept. But
right.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Great.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. We hope this episode has been inspiring and beneficial to you. If you want help on your journey to financial freedom, reach out to us at veritasalaska.com. We'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee with you, either here in our office or virtually, and get to know you and your needs. And though this podcast is free of charge, we do ask that you please do us two quick favors. If you enjoyed the episode, give our pod a great rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with gratitude and intentionality. God bless.